Hi, I'm Lowell Richardson, owner of Catalina Direct.
And I'm John, the owner of Shellback, my recently purchased 1984 Catalina 30.
We're going to use the Shellback as a Catalina Direct project boat for this and many other projects in the future. Today we're going to be working on installing a new Catalina 30 Traveler. We're going to replace the original arched Traveler with a Traveler that's straight and has a lot of other features that we'll share with you that I think you'll like. Catalina's kind of taken a unique approach to design over the years. Instead of building a new model every 3 or 4 years, they've taken the enviable approach of building the same model for years and years, sometimes decades, but continually improving on the boat so that it gets better and better every year. We're going to make this boat into a boat that's a little newer and has some features that the original boat didn't have. So thanks for joining us. Let's get started. We're going to start by removing all of the equipment that might be in our way during the process. We're going to completely remove the Dodger and get it out of our way, and remove the main sheet, swing the boom out over the side of the boat so that we're not hitting our head on that as we're working. So the first step is to clear the deck of all the debris that's going to be in your way. Notice how much the rise there is in the Traveler, how much higher it is in the center than at the ends. So the challenge is, visualize yourself sailing to weather. You've got the main sheet strapped in hard, and you see a deadhead or something that you need to dodge. Usually you're going to have to ease the Traveler down in order to be able to fall off and miss the deadhead. But guess what? Even with minimal load on the main sheet, once you start to go to leeward with it, the Traveler won't go because the distance is increasing as you try to go outboard. So it just won't move. There are a couple of other issues that were here from the first day this Traveler was built. Number one, it's only equipped with blocks that create a 3-to-1 purchase. That's not nearly enough to haul the main sheet Traveler to weather when it's windy. And here's the second issue. It's only supported by these 4 rollers, little rubber rollers that ride on a stainless shaft. I'm not sure they ever turned under load. They certainly don't turn now. So that's never was adequate for a 30-foot boat. It's just the best technology that was available at the time. So inside the boat you can see that each end of the Traveler is secured with 3 bolts, and then Catalina typically used a washer, a lock washer, a standard hex nut, and then finally a cap nut or acorn nut on the bottom end so that it wasn't sharp on somebody's head. So these will all have to be removed, of course. This is one place where you're going to need 2 people, one outside with a big screwdriver and one inside with the wrench. Notice that you don't see the head of the middle bolt on deck. The middle bolt was countersunk deep into the track in order to also provide a recess for the pin that secures the Traveler control car to drop into the hole. So the middle fastener, the head, is way down inside the track there. So now that we've removed the nuts from the inside of the boat and loosened things up, I'm just going to use a power driver here slowly just to save my wrist. Just take it easy and keep it centered. You could do that by hand, of course, but this is a lot easier. And notice that block just came right off with it as well. So there you go. Notice that the holes for the mounting bolts are slotted. We're going to temporarily assemble the risers and the track with just a couple bolts at each end in order to be sure everything fits right onto the deck and get our positioning. We're going to put a little Merlube on the threads here. That'll keep them from galling. Stainless steel has a tendency to gall when you tighten the nuts down, especially if you use a crescent wrench, or not a crescent, but a socket wrench and a ratchet handle and go fairly fast. It'll gall every time if you don't lubricate it. So we're going to use a little Merlube to keep that from happening, because we're not going to waste any time getting these tightened down. We won't clean all of the old sealant up today, but we do need to remove and clean the portion on the outer end of the old teak riser because the new Traveler pad is going to end up covering it. So what I've done here is spray a little of this debond onto the surface. This was actually designed to help you remove a piece of hardware that was bedded down with something like 3M42 or 5200. It both makes the bond fail, but also is a good cleanup. It's not magic, but it's way faster than soap and water to help get this old sealant off, so we'll work on that. Be patient. You want to spray it and let it sit for 5 minutes or so, and then come back. We've used a scrub brush, and it just you slowly be able to make some headway on it and clean that up so that we can install the Traveler. So it helps if you work back and forth, port to starboard, so that you do a little work while the other side's soaking. Here's the starboard side now, and we're going to call this good for the moment. The rest of it will get cleaned up after we get the install done, but we want to keep moving on the project. Got it cleaned up enough on the outboard side to get the Traveler feet mounted. Customers often ask how they're going to repair the old bolt holes, and my response is don't. If you do a gel coat repair, it's always going to be visible. What I would recommend is what we're doing here. Just take a simple countersink tool and countersink that hole. Put a flathead bolt in it. From outside the boat, it looks like something's bolted inside, and from inside the boat, it looks like something's bolted outside. So let's take a look how that looks when we're done here. Okay, so we need to do a little bit more countersink, and that's going to look just fine. Nobody will know the difference. Being sailed in San Francisco Bay, this boat has a Dodger on it, so we've chosen to move the Traveler a little bit farther forward than the original. Notice that the bolt holes, which were on the center of the old Traveler, are lined up with the aft mounting holes on the new stanchion or riser for the Traveler. That gains a little more room under the Dodger for your rope clutches and so forth. To achieve a reasonable symmetry on the athwartship's position, just take an arbitrary measurement. We're going to measure from the inboard edge of the railwood to the center of the mounting bolt for the pad and compare it from side to side. So we're going to drill our first hole here using our little reference block to get the hole square through the deck. Challenges you'll have on a deck that has non-skid is it'll be difficult to drill your hole based on your mark and have it end up perfectly centered where you wanted it. So we're going to slip a bolt through this first hole that we drilled, and then we're going to move to the other side of the boat and drill a hole using the actual mounting bracket as the template. Okay, so we're going to slip a bolt in this side on the hole. Now everything's teed up. We're going to make some pilot holes in the remaining holes on deck. Just a 1/4 inch in or so. That's good. And the next. Great. Now we know exactly where those are. Now that we have 3 of the holes drilled, we're going to use the backing plate that gets used inside of the boat as a template for drilling the other 3 holes. So we're going to just drop 3 of the bolts in where the holes are drilled already. Now we have a perfect template for locating the 3 inboard holes on the port side of the boat. Again, just going to go in a little way. We're just marking the deck. Now when the plate comes off, we'll use our little wooden jig again to get the holes perpendicular to the deck. No chances of error due to measuring. You're using the actual parts as the template. So now that we have the port side drilled, we have it positioned with just one of the bolts through the riser on the port side. we're going to mark the other 2 holes that are on the outboard side of this stanchion. And now we've got everything positioned to drill the last 3 holes using the backing plate from inside. So again, using the backing plate as a template, we have all 6 holes perfectly positioned. No challenges to get the bolts through there. Our next step is to remove the riser from the mounting pad so that we have full access to all 6 mounting holes. Notice that there are 2 small set screws on the side of the riser here that secure the bolt, keeps it from working out over time. So you're going to have to remove those or loosen those set screws in order to be able to remove the bolt from the end of the mounting pad. So we're going to loosen those a little, just enough so that they're not interfering with the thread. Be careful you don't back it out so far that you drop it overboard. And then with a 9/16 inch wrench, we can remove the 2 machine screws that are holding the riser onto the pad. Once they get loose, you can just do it by hand. Be careful you don't lose them. Set them aside carefully so they don't roll off the deck into the water. You might notice when you remove these that the manufacturer has also used some what's the name of that stuff? Yeah, Marlube, to keep the threads from galling. So that's a good thing. Now we're ready to bolt that down and have full access with the screwdriver to all 6 bolts. Now we've bolted the mounting plate down with a couple of fasteners just very securely so it doesn't move around. And we're going to draw a line around the plate, all the way around it. We're going to then take the mounting plate off and put masking tape up to that line so we do a real clean job of getting it installed with a full bed of sealant under it, and the masking tape will keep it from being all over the deck. There we go. A little blue masking tape. Be sure you burnish down the edges so that the sealant doesn't work its way under the adhesive. Okay, ready for sealant. We're going to form a nice generous donut of sealant around each bolt hole. It's a little cold this morning. This stuff isn't wanting to come out too well. Looks good. And of course, we put the tape on so that the excess isn't going to end up all over the deck. There we go. plate down in with one of the bolts in place, and then just follow up with the rest of our bolts. I'm actually holding the plate up a little bit so that the donut doesn't squeeze into the hole before I put the bolt into it. And now I'm going to just press it down a little bit until the sealant starts coming out. And we can go inside and put one nut down just ever so gently. I don't want to tighten the plate so close to the deck that you squeeze all the sealant out. I'd really rather leave a little bit of thickness to form a gasket there before we finalize tightening it all the way down. We'll let it cure a little while and then come back later and tighten it while being careful to hold the screw head so that it doesn't rotate and break the seal that we're forming. We've tightened all the bolts firmly now. Remember when you do that to hold the head of the bolt stationary while your helper tightens the nut from below, otherwise you're going to compromise the bond between the bolt and the sealant. Now, next step is to remove the excess sealant that we have oozing out from the side. So we're going to use our plastic spatula that we use to with the debond kit, and just come along and get rid of the excess. There we go. Come over to the other side. Do the same thing. At the end.
You'll note here that it's helpful to use nice wide tape so you can spread the excess sealant out without going beyond the tape and getting it on deck.
Okay, so that looks pretty good now. We're going to peel the tape off, come back on it. Be careful, because it's like red paint. You're going to have it all over everywhere if you're not careful. I'm taking the tape off in the reverse order of what we put it on. And you end up with a very clean installation without excess sealant all over the deck. Time to bolt everything up. We've loosened the top bolts that hold the track to the brackets, so we have a little latitude to move things around. This bolt just slips in and threads into the bottom of the stanchion, or the riser, whatever you want to call it, and just screw that guy in. We'll put the one in on the other side, tighten it up with a wrench, and don't forget to re-tighten the set screws. So time to put all 5 of the mounting bolts on each end. Again, we're going to apply Mayor Lube to the fasteners so that they don't seize or corrode. And we're going to put just a tiny bit of Mayor Lube in the countersink of each hole where the head of the bolt bears against the countersink, just because that might score the anodizing enough that it could corrode over time. Just a little bit there. When the bolt rotates, it'll smooth that out, keep things from corroding. A washer under each one, since those holes are slotted, and just tighten them down snug. Next step is to install the cars on the outboard end. Well, they're not really cars in this particular traveler, but the control blocks, shall we say, with the cleat platform. Now notice that the manufacturer of the traveler has left us nylon washers or plastic washers of some type here. Again, that is to isolate the stainless plate of the block assembly here from the aluminum of the track, as otherwise you'd have dissimilar metal corrosion again. So that guy just screws in with the two supplied Allen head bolts. And the last tightening. And we're ready for control lines and Mainsheet. Remember at the beginning of this project I showed you how difficult it is to move the car away from the center line with the arch traveler. Remember, the distance between the boom and the traveler increases as you ease the boom to leeward. With a flat track and 480 traveler car bearings, that's no longer a problem. It can move so easily from side to side, even under load. We've got a lot more tension on the Mainsheet than we had earlier. Now, one caveat. If you remove this car from the track, if you for some reason disassemble it and move the car all the way off the end of the track itself, all of those bearings are going to fall out on the deck. So don't do that. You'll never get them back in again. Time to reeve the control lines now. I always start at the cleat end and then just work from the bottom sheave on each block back and forth. Be sure you get it behind the posts here. Next sheave up. Then back to the top sheave on the car. Just keep working your way up the stack of sheaves. Back to the outboard end. Again behind the posts. And then to the becket with a simple bowline. Go, and we're done. Now notice that you have, instead of the 3-to-1 purchase on the earlier assembly, you've got a 5-to-1 purchase. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-to-1. So every pound you put on this line is going to put 5 pounds on the traveler, whereas the earlier design, every pound only put 3 pounds on the traveler. So not only does the car ride much more smoothly with less friction, but you also have more mechanical advantage when you're trying to haul it to weather in a breeze. Well, thanks for joining us today. I hope this helps you to install a new Traveler on your Catalina. If you need any additional assistance, don't hesitate to call me on our tech support line at Catalina Direct. Thanks again.